A's, 0. B's, 0. Double B's, 0. Triple B's, 0. And then that happens.
What is that?
That's America's housing market.
Welcome to the Financing Simplified Podcast with Anthony Venuto. If you're looking for answers to your financial questions, let Anthony and his network of friends and associates answer regular questions that regular people have about their money. Thanks for tuning in. It's time to start simplifying your finances.
Welcome back to our Financing Simplified Podcast. Today, I have Claudio back with us again. And we have our producer who's going to be doing something a little different right now. We got talking about The Big Short. I have no idea. We have no idea what these questions look like. And let's have some fun with it. Stefano,
So
let's do it.
for every little
First,
precursor,
you've got to introduce yourself because everybody hears your voice in the background,
yes.
but nobody knows
I am
who
the
you
phantom. I am the phantom of the show. I come in only when needed. I am the guy behind all the gear that tries to make this go as smooth as possible.
Where can they find you?
They can find me at InTouch Mortgage Solutions, at TTL Films. That's the place. But more importantly, we got to jump back to some fun stuff. For people who don't know, before we get into the questions, what exactly is The Big Short, guys?
It's a movie.
A great movie.
It's a great movie.
About what?
For this episode.
About the 2008 financial crisis.
For everyone that doesn't
in the
realize,
US. In
what
the US.
exactly happened with this big financial crisis?
Well, a lot of things.
Everyone
A
knows.
lot of things happened that led up to the financial crisis. Obviously, the run up in home prices, mortgages, the mortgage-backed securities, basically these tranches, how these mortgages were registered, who was taking out the mortgages, and the banks. Ultimately, the banks, investment companies that were basically profiteering from all these situations, mortgage-backed securities. In a simple way, right? There's a lot behind
And
it.
a few wise men who stood to make millions of dollars to short mortgage-backed securities.
Michael Burr, like obviously everybody knows Christian Bale's character. Ultimately, he saw it happening way before. He pretty much almost, I think, started the short on the mortgage-backed securities options. Nobody wanted to give it to him, and they were laughing at him. But interestingly enough, as a precursor as we get into it, I mean, there's this conversation around shorting the Canadian housing market. This is a sort of play right now because that's something that's out there.
So let's jump right into this. Claudio, you're going to take the helm on this. Michael Burry, obviously, he was the man who found this so-called bubble that was about to burst before it burst. Essentially, that's what happened.
Yeah.
In this film, Michael Burry faced skepticism and resistance from investors due to his unconventional investment strategy. How do you think his experience reflects challenges faced by, certain investors in the real financial world? So let's now step from the movie to the real world. How do you think his unconventional way would respond nowadays?
I think it would be the same as in the movies. I think if you're looking at the Canadian housing economy, I think people would laugh and just not take him seriously because I think, the Canadian government and, the regulators are in place have put good policies and procedures to avoid that, right? They've done their homework. They've seen what happened in 2008. And I think if we take that and we apply it to now, I think it's less likely, even more or less likely to happen.
I think he would get more of a pushback.
Yeah, definitely.
What do you think, Ant? Do you think he would get more of a pushback?
Not really. I think he brought a lot of interesting stuff to the table at a time when that wasn't a conversation.
What if he was still here at this time and said the same thing?
Well, there's a few things that I think, obviously, with the boost in technology, AI, all this stuff that's sort of come to light now, finding these little nuance mismatching mortgages, these tranches and stuff like that. Without getting too complicated, ultimately technology today, because of what had been discovered back then, I think, we're not going to laugh at him now. I don't think it's possible laughing at him. But I think what's very important out of this conversation is that even though we think a lot of these banks, investment companies have learned a lesson, they've just repackaged a lot of this crap. You had was it Chef Bourdain with the soup, and
that's
you had
right.
Margot Robbie
To repurpose the fish.
like to repurpose everything. It explains it and it simplifies it to the everyday American or everyday watcher, a Canadian, to sort of understand exactly how this came to happen, right? And
Do you guys do that? Do you guys do that on a daily basis to try to really simplify it for people, like Jared did?
Hence the tagline, financing simplified. I think, yeah, that's our job as mortgage brokers and any type of brokers, to simplify the process. Like, most of our clients, they're not adapt to know what's happening in the mortgage industry, what's trending, or what's the latest in rates and how it affects people. That's where our job comes into play, right? We're going to say, listen, this is what's happening out there in the market. Here's the landscape. Here are the guidelines. Here's what's working against you. Here's what's working for you. Let's make a plan. Let's make that as transparent to the client and as simple to the client as we can.
For some, yeah. For
some,
some that are
that's right.
some that are, as I said, they're this is their first time. They're really not too. I don't want to say financially savvy, because look, and our client could be the best woodworker, and I have no idea what they do.
Exactly.
And and for us, it's like we're trying to break it down and give us that example. Then we can compete with some of the best of those who come to us with very challenging expectations. Like, they're monitoring the bond market. They're talking to us about repo markets. They're talking to us about all these little complexities within the industry, and we're able to, match their level. So it's competing at either we can simplify it or we can sort of talk to our clients about what's really happening.
And it works on so many levels, right? Like, we'll have the first time home buyer, where, you have to give them as much information as you can. And then even myself, who works with, first time investors and seasoned investors, they make their way up to the third property, and they're starting to hit that wall. So they're coming to us and saying, I want to buy another property, or I want to maximize the equity that I have in these rentals to buy another property. I'm stuck. Where do I go? Right. So it's simplifying not just, the journey, but also the process. Like, making a plan and saying, listen, if this is where you want to end up, this is where we have to start. And it's simplifying that process that brings their clients back.
And in The Big Short, okay, characters bet against the market, knowing that the imploding was coming. The imploding was going to collapse. How do you assess and manage risk in real time, where predicting market downturns is, in fact, very challenging? Because they all bet against the market. That's something that you just don't do.
Well, not that you don't do it. I mean, everybody nowadays.
You don't.
Yeah.
Well, we're hoping that the market goes well. We're not going to bet against it.
There's people out there that are betting against it, and to those individuals that are trying to bet against the market, I mean, look, it's a position, right? That's what it comes down to. It's what's your belief on the market. Generally, what I find when working with a lot of clients, these are the ones that want to purchase a home, right? There's a lot of those people that are out there that are naysayers. They're negative. They're like, I'm going to wait for the market to correct 50% before I go buy a home. And I'm like, okay, that's great. I applaud you if you think the market's going to get to, correct 50%. And what I'll say to that is, ultimately, we learned a valuable lesson. But if the home price is correct 50%, you're not going to be buying a home regardless, because there's going to be such a catastrophic impact. Like during the 08 financial crisis, when home prices in the U.S. corrected, were people buying homes? No.
People
they were
lost
losing their
everything.
homes. They were
lost
losing their
everything.
homes.
Well, they were walking away from their homes.
But not only that, banks folded, leaving their portfolios investment to zero. Pensions, everything. Like
that's what I'm saying. So it's like, if someone
it wasn't just about housing.
It wasn't. That's what I'm trying to explain. Is if home prices correct 50%, what's the catalyst? Is it home prices going to correct on what basis? On what? Just because they're unaffordable? Like, the entire economy has to collapse in order for home prices, especially here in Canada, at least in my opinion, would have to correct. They're not just going to adjust naturally because, ultimately home prices, we can build them cheaper, because we know we can't build homes cheaper. We have wages, obviously the trades. Canada is a housing economy. It's built on housing. So you have to think about it and say, if you're betting against the market, ultimately there is options for you.
And you know what? I want to take a stand on, not a stand on this, but I guess a position, because those that are betting against the market, if you have, I feel like it's already failed, because prices have already started to increase. So
who has already failed?
the people that are betting against
the
market saying that the housing market's going to crash, it's a bold statement, but we've already seen house prices correct.
Okay.
Or they didn't correct enough. Like a lot of people, this is
they
the
drop.
reality.
Like we've seen, and the thing is we've seen home prices drop. Depending on the area, $300,000 to $350,000. And people are, and I applaud the people that were expecting more of that. People thought they were going to drop even more, but we've already seen those values now start to come back up.
Yeah, but home prices, what areas corrected that amount, and ultimately, when those home prices corrected, there was probably a very small few that saw the opportunity to go and say,
exactly.
I can get this house at $350,000 off the peak to trough pricing. Are they going to execute it, or are they going to sit there and say, I'm going to wait for them to go down even more?
Yeah, but now here we go. Ready? Steve Carell's character, Mark Baum, expresses moral outrage at the corruption and greed in the system. In your opinion, guys, how accurate is this portrayal, and have there been significant changes in corporate ethics within the financial sector since this crisis around the entire world?
The 08 financial crisis changed everything.
Yeah.
Like the way we look at banking, the way we look at housing, the way it opened up the door to so many different vantage points, like to look at everything more closely. And this literally brought more attention to the housing market, I believe, because a lot of people didn't see that. Like prior to 2008, nobody saw that. And I think the banks themselves right now, especially the ones here in Canada, I can't really talk about the ones in the US, I think, because ultimately I think they just revamped a lot of their programs. It is corporate greed. The banks want to make billions of dollars. This is the thing. They have shareholders to report to. They have to pay dividends. They want to basically increase their market dominance. So the banks are going to push the boundaries. Like we were just at a conference not too long ago, and we talked to a lot of the banks. Some of the banks that were offline for the longest time, they're back. And what did they say? Their risk appetite's there. They're looking to expand their portfolio. They do believe, like if the banks believe that the mortgage business is solid in Canada, they would not be lending. There would be a credit crunch, and maybe that's still to come. Who knows? But ultimately, right now, even through the whole process, banks were still lending in Canada. The rates were a little bit higher. Their criteria might have changed a little bit, but they weren't saying flat out no.
But you understand it, and Claudio understands it. But for a guy like me, that I'm behind the scenes listening to this podcast time in and time out, there's a lot of times where you guys are talking, and I personally do not understand it. It's above my knowledge of understanding, and I gotta really stress that. Remember when Jared he talked about the Jenga? He created the Jenga aspect. Correct. I think that was exactly what everyone needed to see. How if you take this out, take that out, create that, again, that dog shit, it will all collapse. So why is it that financing and everything within it is so complicated, yet in that one scene, he made it so simple?
Financing, banking stuff is designed purposely to be complicated. It is. I believe it. I believe it to be complicated for a reason, because if everybody understood it, there'd be a lot of people that are able to make money off of it. And the banks want to complicate things so that it's less available to the common person unless they understand what's happening. We were talking about the Bank of Canada. I think a lot of people, they look at the Bank of Canada, they don't understand what these particular terms are or understand the gravity of the situation when they talk about things like quantitative tightening or quantitative easing.
I have no idea what that means.
Right. So when you think about it, like what's happening with the money supply, like, and we talk about things like M1 and M2 money supply, what's happening, the repo markets, like it's designed to be complicated so that people may or may not sort of look at homes in the sense of, I'm going to refer to the mortgage industry. Obviously, investment bankers, stock markets, look at what's happening. They look at the US, they'll decipher what is going to happen next. For example, the Bank of Canada, the probability. It's just they bet. They have these things called Bloomberg terminals, and they're very expensive tools, and they produce a lot of information. It can calculate it and say, hey, certain investment hedge funds, for example, I'm using this as a very simple term. They're going to say, hey, there's a 90% chance that the Bank of Canada is going to cut in September. There's a 60% chance they're going to cut. And based on those numbers that are just predictions, they're going to move a market. It's going to change bond yields. It's going to change sentiment. These are
Trajectory of
the
things.
trajectory of things are all based on other aspects. This is why it's very important for Canadians that are watching. They're just reading the headline. They're like, oh yeah, Bank of Canada is going to hold at 5%. But there's a lot of meat behind that conversation.
I have something to say. And Claudio, I want you to jump on this. There was a line in the movie, probably one of my favorites, where Brad Pitt, also played Ben, says this, and I quote, "Truth is like poetry." And he says, this is the line he delivered, "The truth is like poetry, and most people fucking hate poetry." And so now I ask you, Claudio, if the truth is like poetry and everyone hates the truth, what is the actual truth? What are people looking for?
I don't know if I'm going to say this and if it's going to come off, if people might take this the wrong way, but
Try.
I think the people that hate the truth are the ones that just either they can't stomach it, or they're not at a level to understand the truth, or not ready to accept the truth. I think it's more mentally. I think it could depend on their certain situation, but we have clients that want the truth, especially when you come back to the mortgage game. How much I can qualify for? Can I afford this? Is this the right option for me? Is this the right product for me? So, I mean, the truth is one of the hardest things to bear. It comes to almost anything in life, right? Life will knock you down, and that's the truth, right? Life is not easy peasy. It's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows. And I think, especially in the financial market and in the mortgage industry, the truth hurts. And
Can you
can you
handle the
it?
truth?
Yeah, I think it's more on a mental level and an emotional level. Everyone's truth is different. The truth can be so many things.
So the truth for me, and a lot of the times, is we understand that housing affordability is a crisis in Canada. And unfortunately, I would say these are the cards sometimes you're dealt really good cards in life, sometimes you're not. And you have the ability and the power to change your income. You have the ability to change the course of how much money you need to earn to afford a home. Some people have that luxury, some people don't. Some people are going to be stuck, unfortunately, in menial jobs. And it is sad. It's a sad reality that a lot of people cannot afford to buy a home in Toronto. But that doesn't mean that they can't afford to buy a house somewhere else.
They're going to have to go really
They're going to have
else,
to change their guidelines. Like, we can't expect, or we should, obviously the government has failed. And I'm going to say this honestly, I don't care what people think, but the government has failed a lot of our first-time home buyers. They have failed to deliver on their promises. That's not a political jab at the Liberal government. It's just a jab at the government themselves. Do they want to adjust the way that they do it, or are they trying to appease the rich and the famous? And by that I mean, like, if you want to live in Manhattan, I always use this example. Like, people might say, "Oh, Toronto's nowhere close to Manhattan." I'm like, well,
it's closer than you think.
It's closer than you think. But I said this many, many years ago. If you want to live in Manhattan and you want to pay for a home in Manhattan, you got to be able to afford a home in Manhattan. If you want to live in the Bridle Path, I would love to live in the Bridle Path. I don't make enough money to live in the Bridle Path or Forest Hill. Like, we just don't make enough money to afford that home. And so the reality comes down to this. If you're going to want to buy a home, you either have to change your ability. So either find a job that's going to pay you, get into a career that's going to afford you that income. The housing prices aren't going to adjust to you. You need to adjust to the housing prices.
So guys, now we come to the segment of this episode where I'm going to throw out quotes from the movie, and you're going to give me your honest, quick response to it. Tell me if they're accurate, inaccurate, if it's a memorable moment, and if it changes the course of thinking, right? So, Claudio, let me go to you first.
Sure.
So Christian Bale, Michael Burry says, and this is quoted from the movie, he says, "People want an authority to tell them how to value things, but they choose this authority not based on facts or results. They choose it because it feels authoritative and familiar." How do you feel about that? That people aren't just looking at facts. They're looking at, well, that looks pretty serious, so it must be true.
Yeah, I think that actually holds a lot of water because, there's people that will take everything the media says and hold it accountable, or they'll say like, oh, this news channel said it, has to be true.
Has to be true, which is not.
And at the end of the day, it's not. So you have to be able to dive a little bit deeper, deconstruct what is being said. And I think, even looking at the Bank of Canada press conference is not what they're saying, it's not what's not being said. Reading in between the lines, and making your own judgment on it. If you're looking at the news and you're just living by the news, your life is gonna go one way. It's gonna be veered towards how they want you to live their life.
And then
Confirmation bias.
Yeah.
You're chasing confirmation bias. If I believe one thing, I'm going to research that in one thing. And I always tell clients to be like, oh, the market, this, that. I'm like, for every article that you can present to me in one way, I can find equal on the other side.
100%. So now you'll have to take your own facts into consideration.
I think the truth lies back in between, in the middle.
The truth lies to the eye of the beholder, right? So if you're going to present them truth, now it's their decision. Let me keep going. So the next one is this. Mark Baum, Steve Carell says one of the most powerful lines in the movie. Simple, yet powerful. He says, the banks got greedy and we can profit off their stupidity. Fuck yeah, I'm going to do it. So does this mean that we finally realized that there is the greed that we can profit from it, so we're going to profit from it? So now, is he right in thinking he's going to take advantage, or is he now a part of the system that's corrupted?
There's always winners and losers in a situation. Where there's blood on the street, somebody's making money. That's
but now
the bottom
he's
line.
joining the blood by saying that.
Hey, listen, ultimately, at the end of the day, you can love him or hate him. He saw an opportunity. Remembering he has people that are investing in him to make that call. Yeah. It's like no different than someone who has an investment structure. If they see an opportunity to make you money, go for it.
I want to add to this.
Of course.
I mean, and it's just like, how people sometimes view builders and developers as they hold all the cards. They're going to dictate, everything with regards to housing. And it's not fair that they're the ones making the billions of dollars. And sometimes people say, oh, it's not fair. Well, unfortunately, the truth is they're the ones that they first invested in. And
they're
take
taking
a step
the
back.
risk.
No, I don't think even in their right minds, people, and let's talk about Woodbridge back in the 80s when it was nothing but farmland and people see an opportunity to buy that land. How can you be against these people that seen that risk? It's either jealous. I think
it's jealousy. You were just going to take the words right out of my mouth.
And you know what? There's two views of this. Is you can applaud them and saying, you know what, good for you. You've seen the foresight. It's no different than people making money in the stock market. There's always going to be winners in life. It's always how you have to view it. Are you going to take that and say, you know what, I want to live. I want to kind of amount to that. I want to be on the prowl. I want to be on the hunt, and I want to get there one day. It's all about goals. It's all about vision.
Well said.
To the victor goes the spoils.
Yeah.
And here's another spoil. Ryan Gosling says, Anthony, I'm standing in front of a burning house and I'm offering you fire insurance on it. Isn't that almost like saying it's right there in front of you? Why are you not taking it?
I think this scene actually really
Strong.
resonates with the market right now.
That's right.
Because there was opportunity when prices fell for individuals to say, this is your opportunity, right? But it's still like, is it really happening, or should I buy into it? Do I take it in? Like, because ultimately they're not trusting the salesperson. They're like, what are they gaining, right? This is the whole conversation that seems like, what is this guy trying to do? Is he trying to screw us over, right? Like, is this really too good to be true? Like, what's the situation? And it's no different than someone like an agent or a broker talking to a client, like we've talked about on multiple occasions, saying, you're looking to get into the housing market now. You need to have a conditional offer because your finances are not in order. This is the opportunity right now where you can go in while people are not necessarily, it's not a seller's market. You're in a buyer's market. You can put a condition of financing. Here's the opportunity. And they're like, no, I think there's not an opportunity. I think prices are going to come down. I don't trust the situation right now. I think it's going to either get worse or it's going to get better, in my opinion. So it's very resonant right now, because it's like, if the salesperson is telling you this is an opportunity right now, not because I'm trying to make a check here, because I'm actually trying to help you out. At the end, he was trying to obviously make a check too. He was trying to make money, but he made money by helping somebody else out. He said, look, I'm seeing this. We can profit from this together. It's the symbiotic relationship between a broker agent and their client saying, let's get this done. Here's the opportunity for you because it's the best opportunity for you.
And there's a lot of people in the industry that have a negative stigma towards real estate investors because they're the ones scooping up all the properties, and they're the only ones that are have the ability to purchase this. Now we're talking about like pre-pandemic or even during the pandemic, but we had to take a step back. They didn't just have the ability to purchase those properties overnight, and I feel like people always. They get stuck between luck. They're like, oh, they're lucky. They were lucky to be able to afford that. No, because a lot of these people, a lot of our investors started with nothing. They didn't own a home. They bought their first home and they made their money work for them. They had a plan. They had a roadmap, or they had a journey that they wanted to go on, and they had an end goal. And I think with just trying to resonate with people, I said, make your own luck. You have to work hard. Yeah, there's no, everyone's dealt their own cards. Yes, maybe some people have family that are able to help them go on title, give them that extra little bit of down payment. Unfortunately, some people are not.
The harder you work, the luckier you get.
Here is the very last question of this episode.
Just a quick one, Stefan. Just quick, because I with that comment, a lot of people crap on investors, but the reality is yes, they might have helped inflate home prices, but they've also brought more inventory to the market. There's people out there that they purchase the homes when people can't, and they introduce that inventory back into the market. What's happening now is we don't have investors back on the table at full force. Yeah. And yes, obviously there's consequences to everything, but we're facing higher immigration levels with no one buying up these pre-development condos that are introducing inventory to the market. We're kicking this inventory can down the road. At one point in time, are we going to say we need investors to come back to the market? Because as that gap between the rich and the wealthy widens, you need the people that can do it to come back to the market and do it. Mm-hmm. That's just the reality. We don't have it. We don't have it right now.
Just look at rent prices.
But that's what I'm saying. Everybody wants to crap on one particular side, but ultimately you have to look at both sides of the equation and realize there is another side to this conversation. 65 to 70% of the pre-development condo needs to be spoken for or sold in order for that development to continue on. And if you don't have investors buying that, you're eliminating projects, you're eliminating inventory from the market. That's going to cost rents to go up. That's just the bottom line. One example.
And the very last question for this episode, probably the strongest one, and it is by Christian Bale, playing Mike Burr. He says, if we're right, and I hope I'm wrong, but I know I'm right, people lose homes, people lose jobs, people lose retirement savings, people lose pensions. You know what I hate about fucking banking? It reduces people to numbers, and those numbers are going to fail. Now, having said that, as our last piece of this podcast, I feel like this is probably, it hits so home because now we are all a number that if those numbers collapse, so do we.
This brings us back to that conversation around the banking system, around the home prices, what's happening in the economy. If people want to buy a house and they think the prices are going to correct, what's the relationship between home prices going down? What's causing it? Is it going to be unemployment going through the roof? Is it going to be massive layoffs? Is it going to be people losing their jobs? Interest rates remaining high? There's so many different components. And I mean, this question can be literally interpreted in so many different ways when we look at the Canadian economy. If we're going to take on those lenses of the Canadian economy, but literally we are reduced to numbers. The Bank of Canada takes everything as numbers. They know how many people, they know how many people have mortgages, how many people are in arrears. They know how many people are, struggling. They have all these numbers, but who are they going to protect? Those who can afford it. Realistically, we work with clients all the time. They have very small mortgages. Some of them, ultimately, interest rates go up. It impacts them a couple hundred, maybe $1,000 a month. But because of the fact that they've gotten an increase in pay, it's helping them sort of stomach those adjustments. But to some, it's going to be the end of the world for them. And ultimately, we are just numbers. This is the reality. We are just numbers to the broader economy.
I think with everything, like even, when you go to apply for a mortgage, the bank just sees you as a number. They're just checking that ticket, passing it along in life. And, back to how much is invested in the Canadian economy. A lot of Canadians don't have retirement savings plans. A lot of people don't have any savings in general. When you're looking at the price of everything, the price of food, the price of gas, the price of rent,
Hard to save.
It's very hard to save. And I think that is one area where the government has failed us, because there's taxes on everything, where it's really hard to save. And, when people reach a certain age, and you even look at, if they don't have a pension plan with their work, that's going to pay them after they retire, we're faced, we either can't retire, or we're banking on very limited pay from the government which is old age security and CPP if you have worked. So this falls into, a home is much more than what people think. For some, it's a retirement savings plan. They're banking on that equity to allow them to retire comfortably and live in their home as long as they can. So I think the power of home ownership is bigger than just actually owning a home,
Especially in Canada.
especially in Canada. Yeah.
Especially in Canada. But guess what we are going to do in Canada? We're going to tell the Canadians where they can find us.
Claudio's, as I said, he's a phantasma.
Yeah,
he's a phantom on social media.
Claudio, what's your Instagram?
Instagram is at InTouch Mortgage Solutions. InTouch Mortgages. You can find me there. We do have direct messages on Instagram, emails, through the website. You can contact me directly through email. So as much as my presence on social media is non-existent, I am very present and very existent in to serve your mortgage needs.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And you can find me at _Venuto on Instagram, obviously our YouTube and our YouTube channel at InTouch Mortgages,
And Spotify.
and our Instagram on InTouch Mortgages, and our Spotify and iTunes podcast.
Financing Simplified.
Financing Simplified.
And we will see them next time.
Thanks again for watching.